Okay, here we are back on my 2016 article, Music Educated and Uprooted, My Story of Morality, Whiteness, Musicking and Teaching, and Action, Criticism, and Theory for Music Education, Volume 15, Issue 4. Page 47, Conclusion. As a method, autoethnography provides unique access to the object of study's memories and experiences. In this type of research, objectivity and transferability are traded for subjectivity and singularity. I have come to believe that, because of autoethnography's subjective nature, it is well suited for exploring theoretical concepts that may be difficult to quantify. The aim of autoethnography is not, then, to quantify, but to experience, elicit, and explain reflectively. Because of the reflective nature of autoethnography, I was able to tell my story and interpret it around the themes, especially the central theme, roots. The guiding question for this autoethnography was, how has the intersection of morality, whiteness, and poverty affected my attitudes, actions, and roles relative to music teaching and learning? I shared my experiences using techniques from memoir writing around the theme roots, church, music styles, and dominance of class. Of particular prominence were my evolution into Homo educandus musicae, rejecting popular musicking for school music, and my experience with dominance of class. In his critique of schools as reifying scarcity, Illich states, quote, schools serve as an effective creator and sustainer of social myth. Academic priests mediate between the faithful and the gods of privilege and power, a ritual of expiation which sacrifices its dropouts, branding them as scapegoats of underdevelopment, end quote. As someone who survived the sacrificing ritual of education, supposedly succeeding at this ritual, I nonetheless find my success personally uprooting, and I have become one of Illich's priests, sustaining the myth of music scarcity. However, to fight against the myth of music scarcity, I chose to arrange popular music for students rather than reifying the universalizable published music for concert band, orchestra, and choir. My yearning to become music educated often led to feelings of uprootedness, uprooted from my soil, from meaningful musicking with friends, and from family and familiar places. Henry Nouwen might call my expectations and needs a tragedy. Quote, the tragedy is that we are indeed caught in a web of false expectations and contrived needs, end quote. Simone Weil, maybe they, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, suggested one of the contrived needs is education. Quote, he is severed from the universe surrounding him, end quote. And because, quote, the peasant dreams of having a school teacher son, quote, unquote, education, and music education specifically, is an uprooting industry fueled by yearnings in our social system. Yeah. So autoethnography is beneficial, but ultimately I'm coming to think far more and more just any philosophical writing is autoethnographic. And the problem is that most of it's not reflective enough to know it's autoethnographic. They think that they're putting forth universals very often, when it's really just universalizing their experience. And that doesn't mean that there isn't a universal, but that the philosophical universals aren't necessarily universal, because they're based on our understanding of our experience. If you don't have experience with the poor, for instance, your philosophy may say nothing about the poor. If you don't have experience with the ecological destruction of your actions, your philosophy won't open space for that either. Okay, continuing. from page 48, searching for a rerouting praxis. And here's where I try to find a way forward, right? And I look back to do so. As I reflect on my experiences with music education, I challenged myself to imagine a music education praxis that would be rooting, or at least not unnecessarily uprooting. This is challenging because music educators must first realize their own uprootedness. Quote, whoever is uprooted himself uproots others. And that's a while ago. In my search, I came across the Foxfire teaching practices, which were honed in rural Georgia. Developed since the 1960s, these practices included beginning with learning choice, teacher facilitation, active learning, peer teaching and group work, an audience beyond the teacher, creativity, reflection, and most notably to me, connections between the classroom work and the surrounding communities and the world beyond. These practices seem to lead to a type of curriculum Elliot Silverman described as, quote, dynamic multicultural intercultural curriculum, end quote, in which the music teacher works in the context of familiar and unfamiliar music cultures. Many of my own music education experiences seem to focus on the unfamiliar, but not on the familiar. The Foxfire practices were developed when Wigington decided to have students create a magazine based on the folk knowledge in their community. He sent students home to find content for the magazine. Quote, so they went home and really talked to their own relatives, some of them for the first time. From these conversations came superstitions, old home remedies, weather signs, a story about a hog hunt, a taped interview with a retired sheriff, and the time the local bank was robbed, and directions for planting by the signs, end quote. The goal of these teaching practices is to benefit students and communities through the collection of artifacts, tapes, and photographs, and can help guide students to realize the cultural richness they have in their own places of living. However, the magazine provided a unique application of approaches that might be used in different classes, in different places, differently. The 1980s saw teachers stress the importance of the process that has given rise to the magazine. In this way, Foxfire provides an approach to teaching students and not just a model to have other schools publish their own magazines. Foxfire is more than a magazine. The Foxfire practices can help teachers create learner-centered, community-focused learning environments and also provide a unique approach to cultivate agency. It is run by high school students. Students are going on to college knowing that they can be forces for constructive change, knowing that they can act responsibly and effectively rather than always being acted upon, end quote. The dual focus of the community valuing and the student agency provides interesting opportunities for music teachers. A musicking education modeled on Foxfire might emphasize the obvious importance of teachers knowing the ecological, social, and economic contexts of the place where they live and teach. I could imagine a musicking education where teachers send students to their homes to audio and video record the songs their elders in their community sing. Students would then compile them into a songbook, which they would perform and publish. What type of music educators, then, would we in teacher education need to cultivate? Do our rural, rooted communities benefit from well-intending young music teachers bringing the gospel of Granger or Holst and define their work as good-intentioned personal sacrifice? I would challenge these music educators by echoing Illich's challenge, exclaiming, to hell with good intentions. Quote, it is incredibly unfair for you to impose yourself on a village where you are so linguistically deaf and dumb that you don't even understand what you are doing or what people think of you. And it is profoundly damaging for yourselves when you define something that you want to do as good, a sacrifice, and help, end quote. Newly minted music teachers need to stop going into rural neighborhoods with good music, which the rural students are too backward or uneducated to appreciate, helping rural people develop. Rather, music educators should enter communities in humility as guests and respect these communities' ways of living and musicking. As Bates suggested, quote, "It is neither optimal or necessary, nor necessary for children to live as exiles from comfortable and original musical cultures. A primary goal can and should be to allow students to deepen understandings and skills in familiar musics. This would require music teachers to begin by acknowledging that children come to class with knowledge from the outside world, and as such, that their knowledge needs to be honored and valued." And that last quote was from Abrams. And continuing on, musicking then would be understood as an activity through which students are able to act, with or without being music educated, and their local places as valuable resources for school music and not places to be left behind in search for better, more cultured musics kept behind the walls of other distant places, such as schools and universities. That's it. Have a great day.